Queen Zalara of the Cathar Empire sat upon her obsidian throne, her seven-fingered hand resting on the cold armrest as she gazed out at the vast chamber before her. 15 years had passed since the devastating war with the Terran Alliance had ended, yet the scars remained, both on her empire and in her heart. The magnificent throne room, with its towering crystalline spires and ancient murals depicting the glory of Cathar conquest, could not fill the void left by her daughter's death. Princess Lyra, her only child and heir, had perished in the Battle of the Shadow Nebula, the conflict that had finally broken both sides enough to force a peace. Or so the official record stated. Zalara had reviewed the battle footage countless times, watching her daughter's command vessel erupt into flames against the backdrop of swirling cosmic gases. The ship's final transmission, Lyra's voice, calm even in her final moments, played in Zalara's dreams most nights. "Long live the Empire, Mother. I am sorry I could not return to you." The council chamber filled with her advisors and military commanders, their scaled skin reflecting the ambient light in hues of deep purple and blue. The Cathar, a matriarchal society built on logic and strategic might, had recovered remarkably since the war. Their homeworld of Cathara Prime and its 12 colony worlds had rebuilt, their military forces had been modernized, and their economy was once again thriving. Yet the peace with the Terrans remained fragile, monitored by the ineffectual Galactic Council that seemed more concerned with bureaucracy than actual peacekeeping. "Your Majesty," General Forlag's deep voice broke through her contemplation. "The military exercises in the Outer Rim have been completed successfully. Our forces are at optimal readiness should the humans attempt any provocations." Forlag, the supreme commander of the Cathar military forces, was a stalwart warrior who had lost his son in the war. His loyalty was unquestionable, but his hawkish stance toward the Terrans had only hardened over the years. His tall frame, covered in battle scars, seemed permanently tensed, as if he expected an attack at any moment. "I trust you maintain the agreed-upon distance from the border zone, General," asked Xyler, the Queen's diplomatic advisor. Unlike Forlag's battle-hardened appearance, Xyler's features were smooth, his gestures measured. "The last thing we need is to give the Terran Alliance another excuse to increase their military presence in the neutral zones." Forlag's facial ridges darkened with irritation. "We conducted our exercises well within our sovereign territory, advisor. Perhaps you should concern yourself more with the humans' continuous violations of the trade agreements than with my military operations." "Enough," Zalara said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The Cathar Empire does not bicker among itself like primitive species. We are logic. We are unity." Both males bowed their heads in acknowledgement of her rebuke. Zalara was about to continue when the doors to the chamber burst open, and a communications officer rushed in, breaking all protocols of court etiquette. "Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion," the young female said, her chest heaving with exertion. "We've received an emergency transmission from Border Station Epsilon. They've detected an unidentified vessel approaching Cathar space." Zalara straightened in her throne. "Terran, unknown, Your Majesty. The vessel bears markings of ancient Cathar design, but shows signs of hybrid construction, incorporating what appears to be Terran technology. It's heavily damaged and requesting emergency docking clearance." Forlag stepped forward, his hand already on his ceremonial blade. "Clearly a trap. No Cathar would sully our sacred designs with human technology." "There's more," the communications officer continued, her voice faltering slightly. "The ship's identification signal. It matches Princess Lyra's personal code." The chamber fell into absolute silence. Zalara felt as though the floor beneath her throne had suddenly vanished. For 15 years, that code had been deactivated, preserved in the Imperial archives as a memorial to her fallen daughter. "Impossible," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "That code died with my daughter in the Shadow Nebula." "It could be a Terran trick," Forlag growled. "They may have salvaged parts of the princess's ship and are using it to infiltrate our territory." Xyler stepped forward cautiously. "Your Majesty, regardless of its origin, a ship in distress. I am well aware of the ancient laws, Zalara snapped, her composure slipping momentarily. She closed her inner eyelids briefly, centering herself. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. Allow the vessel to dock at military outpost Krelvorn. Place the entire facility under highest alert status. No one boards or leaves that ship until I arrive personally. She rose from her throne, her royal robes flowing around her tall frame like liquid obsidian. Prepare my personal shuttle. General Forlag, assemble your most trusted squad to accompany me. Advisor Zyler, you will join us as well. As her court bowed and moved to execute her commands, Zalara stood immobile, her face an emotionless mask that hid the storm within. 15 years of contained grief threatened to break free, but she ruthlessly suppressed it. Logic must prevail. The dead did not return. And yet, a tiny spark of impossible hope had ignited in her heart. A dangerous, painful hope she dared not acknowledge even to herself. The military outpost of Krelvorn was a fortress built into an asteroid at the edge of Cthar space. As Queen Zalara's shuttle approached, she could see the strange vessel already docked in the highest security bay. It was indeed an odd amalgamation, the elegant, predatory lines of a Cthar royal escort ship, but with clear modifications of Terran design. The hull bore countless battle scars, some recent, others layered with age. Zalara strode down the boarding ramp of her shuttle, flanked by General Forlag and a dozen elite guards, their weapons at ready. Advisor Zyler followed a few paces behind, his keen eyes taking in every detail of their surroundings. Status report. Zalara demanded of the outpost commander, who greeted her with a low bow. The vessel has been contained within an energy field, Your Majesty. Our scanners detect 2 life forms aboard, 1 Cthar, 1 Terran. They have made no attempt to leave the ship, but continue to request permission to disembark under diplomatic protocol. A Cthar and a Terran? Zalara's outer eyelids flickered, the equivalent of a human raising an eyebrow. Together? Yes, Your Majesty. The Cthar life sign shows some anomalies, possibly due to cybernetic enhancements not of our design. Forlag's hand tightened on his weapon. Abominations. No true Cthar would allow Terran technology to be grafted to their sacred body. Zalara ignored him, her attention fixed on the mysterious ship. Drop the containment field. Allow them to disembark, but maintain weapons lock at all times. The energy barrier around the vessel shimmered and vanished. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, with a mechanical groan, the ship's main hatch slowly opened, revealing a dark interior. 2 figures emerged from the shadows. The first was unmistakably Cthar, a female with the characteristic height and slender build of their species. Her scales gleamed with a royal iridescence that only those of direct imperial lineage possessed. But where a typical Cthar-esque skin would be flawless, hers was marked by a jagged scar that ran from her right temple down to her jawline. Most striking was her left arm, which from the elbow down had been replaced by an advanced cybernetic prosthesis of unfamiliar design. Behind her came a Terran male, tall for his species but still shorter than the Cthar female. He had the olive skin and dark hair common among certain human populations, with sharp features and alert eyes that scanned the hangar with practiced efficiency. He wore what appeared to be a modified Terran military uniform, stripped of insignia but retaining functional elements. A pulse weapon was holstered at his side, currently secured but within easy reach. The Cthar female stepped forward, her gaze locking with Zalara's. For a heartbeat, the queen felt the universe itself pause. "Mother," the female said, her voice both familiar and changed. "It has been a long time." Zalara's composure, maintained through wars and disasters, through 15 years of mourning, threatened to shatter entirely. The female before her was older than Lyra had been at her supposed death, but the resemblance was undeniable. The same royal bearing, the same tilt of the head when she spoke. "Lyra," Zalara whispered, using her daughter's name for the first time in over a decade. "Yes." The female inclined her head slightly. "I apologize for the Dramatic entrance. Subtlety was not an option given our circumstances. She gestured to the Terran beside her. This is Alex Ryder, former Terran Alliance pilot, and my companion. We have traveled a long way with information critical to both our peoples. Forlag stepped forward, placing himself between the Queen and the newcomers. If you truly are Princess Lyra, then explain why you travel with a human, bearing Terran modifications on your body, after being presumed dead for 15 years. Lyra, if it was truly her, met the general's suspicious glare with calm dignity. I will explain everything, General Forlag. But not here. The information we carry is too sensitive for such an exposed location. And the human? Forlag demanded, his hand still on his weapon. Where I go, he goes, Lyra stated firmly. He has saved my life multiple times, and I have saved his. Our fates are intertwined. Zalara finally found her voice again. Secure them both and bring them to the interrogation chamber. We will verify their identities and hear their story under control conditions. As the guards moved to escort them, Zalara caught a glimpse of something passing between Lyra and the human. Alex, a look of understanding, of complete trust. It was a connection unlike any she had seen between Cathar and Terran before, and it troubled her nearly as much as the impossible return of her daughter. The interrogation chamber in Krelvorn was designed to be intimidating even by Cathar standards. Stark lighting, neural disruptors embedded in the walls, and truth verification equipment of the highest sensitivity. Zalara sat at the head of a long obsidian table, with Forlag and Xyler flanking her. Across from them sat Lyra and the human, both outwardly calm despite their precarious situation. We have confirmed your genetic identity, Zalara began, her voice carefully controlled. You are indeed Lyra Ktharzil, daughter of my bloodline. What we have not confirmed is how you survived the Battle of the Shadow Nebula when all evidence indicated your destruction. Lyra nodded, as if having expected this approach. My ship was indeed severely damaged in the battle, but not destroyed as it appeared in the recordings. I was critically injured when a secret faction of Terrans, not the Alliance military, captured what remained of my vessel. A secret faction? Xyler leaned forward, his diplomatic instincts engaged. A shadow organization that operates beyond the control of the Terran Alliance government, Lyra explained. They call themselves the Kronos Corporation. They have infiltrated both Cathar and Terran power structures and have been manipulating our peoples toward conflict for decades. The human, Alex, spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly deep and steady for his species. I was a pilot in the Terran Special Operations Division. During a classified mission investigating unusual weapon shipments, I discovered evidence of Kronos activities. Before I could report back, I was captured and held in the same facility where they were keeping Princess Lyra. Forlag snorted in disbelief. A convenient story. No evidence. Just the word of a human and a Cathar who returns with Terran technology embedded in her body. We have evidence, Lyra countered, reaching slowly into a concealed pocket in her garment. The guards tensed, but she merely withdrew a small data crystal of unfamiliar design. 15 years' worth of evidence, gathered at great risk. Data logs recovered from my original ship. Testimony from witnesses we've encountered in the uncharted expanse. Financial transactions linking Kronos to weapons dealers who supplied both sides of the war. She slid the crystal across the table. This includes proof that Kronos orchestrated false flag attacks, blaming each side for atrocities committed by their own operatives. The Battle of the Shadow Nebula itself was manipulated. I was specifically targeted because I was close to uncovering their operations within our Imperial Intelligence Division. Zalara stared at the data crystal, but did not touch it. And the human? What is his true role in this? Lyra's expression softened slightly as she glanced at Alex. After months in captivity, we realized we shared a common enemy. We escaped together, but neither of us could return home. Kronos had agents everywhere, and we would have been eliminated before we could expose the truth. We've spent 15 years in exile, gathering intelligence, staying one step ahead of their assassins, and searching for a way to safely return. She saved my life multiple times, Alex added quietly. In this arm, he gestured to Lyra's cybernetic limb. I helped her obtain it in the black markets of the Perseus Drift. Terran technology, yes, but it was all we could access without risking detection by returning to Cthar space. Xyler picked up the data crystal, examining it carefully. This will need to be verified in a secure system, isolated from our networks. Of course, Lyra agreed, but I urge you to act quickly. Kronos has accelerated its plans. They're preparing for the final stage, a catastrophic event that will reignite full-scale war between our peoples. Zalara studied her daughter, the daughter she had mourned, whose memorial stood in the palace gardens, whose name had been added to the ancestral halls of honor. The physical resemblance was undeniable, but the person before her was not the young princess who had left for battle 15 years ago. This Lyra was harder, more weathered, her royal demeanor tempered with a practical edge that spoke of years surviving in hostile territories. And then there was the way she positioned herself slightly in front of the human, as if ready to protect him despite being in the heart of Cthar territory. It was not the behavior of a captor or even an ally of convenience. It spoke of something deeper. You will both remain under guard while we verify your claims, Zalara announced, rising from her seat. You will be provided appropriate quarters, but your movements will be restricted, and you will be monitored at all times. As they were led away, Zalara caught another of those silent exchanges between her daughter and the Terran. A subtle nod, a shared confidence. Whatever had transpired between them in those 15 years, it had forged a bond that defied the natural order of things as the Cthar understood them. Humans were emotional, impulsive creatures, quick to anger and quicker to act without consideration of consequences. The Cthar had always viewed them with a mixture of contempt and caution. Yet here was her daughter, a princess of the royal bloodline, moving in perfect synchronization with a human warrior, as if they were extensions of the same being. Have the data analyzed immediately, she ordered Xyler, and increase security throughout the outpost. If what they claim is true, we may already be compromised. Alone in her temporary quarters at the outpost, Zalara allowed herself a moment of weakness. She sank onto a meditation platform, her rigid posture finally giving way to the emotional turmoil she had suppressed during the interrogation. Her daughter was alive. After 15 years of grief, of forcing herself to continue ruling without her heir and only child, Lyra had returned, changed, scarred, but alive, and with a human companion whose significance clearly went beyond mere alliance of necessity. Your Majesty, Xyler's voice came through the communication system. We've completed the preliminary analysis of the data crystal. I believe you should see this immediately. The evidence was compelling. Xyler had isolated a secure system and carefully extracted the contents of the crystal. Thousands of data files, communications logs, financial records, and visual documentation. The material was extensive, meticulous, and damning. This transaction log, Xyler highlighted a particular file, shows Kronos shipping the same advanced weapons to both Cthar separatist factions and Terran extremist groups, dated 3 months before the Celium massacre. Forlag, who had joined them in the secure analysis room, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. The massacre that turned public opinion irrevocably toward war. Precisely. Xyler scrolled through more documents. And here, communication between Kronos operatives discussing the target profile of Princess Lyra's ship before the Battle of the Shadow Nebula. They specifically mention ensuring that her ship appears destroyed rather than captured. Zalara absorbed the information in silence, her mind racing through implications and possibilities. If even half of what was in these files was accurate, it meant that the war that had cost millions of lives, that had nearly destroyed both civilizations, had been orchestrated by a third party for profit and power. There's more, Xyler continued grimly. Recent communications suggesting Kronos has placed operatives at the highest levels of both our government and the Terran Alliance, and plans for what they call the Final Convergence, a massive attack using stolen planet killer technology to be blamed on both sides simultaneously. Their ultimate goal appears to be destabilizing both our empires beyond recovery, Forlag admitted reluctantly, creating chaos that would allow them to seize control of key resource points and trade routes. Zalara's decision crystallized. Bring Lyra and the human here. Now, when they arrived, Zalara noted that despite their brief confinement, both looked alert and ready. There was nothing of the prisoner in their bearing, only the patient vigilance of veterans who had long ago accepted that security was never guaranteed. The data appears authentic, Zalara stated without preamble, though we have only scratched the surface of its contents. Tell me more about this final convergence. Lyra stepped forward. Kronos has acquired forbidden singularity technology, weapons that were banned by the Galactic Council centuries ago. They plan to deploy them simultaneously against both Cthar and Terran targets, making each side believe they were attacked by the other. The resulting war would be unlike anything we've seen before. Alex continued where she left off, their briefing seamlessly coordinated. They've established a hidden base in the Jareth asteroid field, within the neutral zone. The attack is scheduled to launch in less than 10 standard days. How can you be certain of a timeline? Forlak Cheninget. Because 3 months ago, we infiltrated one of their communication hubs, Lyra explained. We couldn't get close to their main base, but we intercepted this directive. She produced another data chip, smaller than the first. Confirmation of the operational schedule. Zalara made her decision. We will need to contact the Terran Alliance. If Kronos has infiltrated both our governments, we cannot rely solely on our own forces. Forlak Bristet. Your Majesty, with respect, we cannot trust the humans with. The humans are as much victims in this as we are, General. Zalara cut him off. And if the Kronos Corporation succeeds, there will be no Cthar Empire left to defend. She turned to Xyler. Use your diplomatic channels. Find someone within the Terran leadership who can be trusted, someone not compromised. I can help with that, Alex offered. There's a progressive faction within the Alliance leadership. Admiral Helena Chun. No, not her, Lyra interrupted quickly. Our latest intelligence suggests her aide is compromised. Admiral Costa would be safer. Zalara watched this exchange with interest. The absolute trust they placed in each other's judgment, the way they operated as a single unit. Very well. Advisor Xyler will establish contact with this Admiral Costa through secure channels. In the meantime, an explosion rocked the outpost, sending tremors through the floor beneath them. The security system immediately activated, bathing the room in pulsing crimson light. We're under attack. Forlag shouted, already moving toward the command console. Not an external attack, Lyra said grimly, drawing a sleek weapon from a hidden holster on her thigh. Kronos has operatives here, just as we warned. The security feed confirmed her assessment. Throughout the outpost, personnel were turning on each other, some Cthar guards suddenly attacking their own colleagues with lethal precision. Sleeper agents, Alex explained, his own weapon now in hand. Likely triggered by our arrival, or you're accessing the data. Another explosion, closer this time, sent fragments of the ceiling crashing down. Forlag shouted orders into the communication system, rallying loyal forces to defend the Queen. We need to move, Lyra urged, already positioning herself between the door and her mother. This facility is compromised. Our ship is still docked. It's our best chance. Zalara nodded sharply. Xyler, transmit the data to the palace through the emergency quantum channel. General, coordinate with security to clear us a path to the docking bay. As they prepared to move, the door to the secure room burst open. 3 Cthar warriors in Imperial Guard uniforms rushed in, weapons raised, but their eyes held a vacant, programmed look that Zalara had never seen in her people before. Protect the Queen, Forlag shouted, drawing his ceremonial blade. But he was too far away. Lyra moved with astonishing speed, her cybernetic arm whirring as she intercepted the first assassin, deflecting his weapon upward as his shot burned into the ceiling. Simultaneously, Alex fired with precise accuracy, his pulse weapon striking the second attacker in the shoulder joint, a non-lethal Cthar vulnerability that few Terrans would know. The third assassin targeted Zalara directly, but the queen was not defenseless. Drawing a concealed energy dagger from her robes, she sidestepped the attack with the fluid grace that all royal Cthar were trained in from childhood. The battle was brief but vicious. Forlag took down one attacker, while Lyra and Alex worked in perfect coordination to subdue the other two. Zalara watched in amazement as they anticipated each other's movements without a word spoken between them. Lyra creating openings that Alex exploited, Alex drawing fire that Lyra turned to advantage. "We must assume the entire outpost is infiltrated," Lyra said as the last attacker fell. "Mother, you need to come with us now. Our ship has countermeasures against Kronos tracking technology." For a heartbeat, Zalara hesitated. To flee an Imperial outpost, to place her trust in a daughter returned from the dead and a Terran warrior. It went against everything her position represented. But the evidence was before her eyes. These assassins wore her own guards' uniforms, carried Imperial authorization. Kronos had already reached farther into her empire than she had believed possible. "Xyler, complete the transmission and then join us," she commanded. "General Forlag, you will accompany us as well." "As you command, Your Majesty," Forlag replied, though his expression showed his displeasure at the idea of boarding a ship with Terran modifications. They fought their way through the corridors of the outpost, encountering more Kronos sleeper agents among the Cthar personnel. Zalara was again struck by the seamless way Lyra and Alex fought together, each compensating for the other's weaknesses, maximizing their strengths. It was a level of coordination that took years to develop. When they finally reached the docking bay, they found it in chaos. Several ships were in flames, and firefights had broken out between loyal troops and infiltrators. "There!" Lyra pointed to their hybrid vessel, still intact at the far end of the bay. "We need to move quickly." A group of infiltrators had positioned themselves between them and the ship. As Forlag prepared to order a frontal assault, Lyra held up her hand. "Wait," she said, then turned to Alex. "Port side approach." He nodded. "Flank and distract." "Exactly." Without further explanation, Alex sprinted to the left, drawing fire from the infiltrators. The moment their attention shifted, Lyra moved with blinding speed along the right side of the bay, using cargo containers as cover. "Now," she shouted, and both she and Alex threw small devices toward the infiltrators. The devices released a dense cloud of silvery particles that seemed to confuse the attackers' targeting systems. "Move," Alex called to Zalara and the others. "The disruptor field won't last long." They made it to the ship just as the infiltrators were recovering. Once aboard, Lyra and Alex moved to the cockpit with practiced efficiency, initiating launch sequences without hesitation. "Your Majesty," Xyler reported as they secured themselves for departure. "I completed the transmission, but I received an automatic response from the palace security systems. There's been an incident there as well." Zalara felt cold dread settle in her stomach. "What kind of incident?" "Unknown. But the emergency protocols have been activated." The ship shuddered as it broke free from the docking clamps. Through the viewports, Zalara could see more explosions erupting throughout the outpost. "Kronos is making its move," Lyra said grimly as she piloted the ship away from the doomed station. "They know we've exposed them, so they're accelerating their timeline. We need to warn the Terran Alliance immediately," Alex added, his hands flying over the navigation controls, "and find a secure location to coordinate a response." Forlag, who had been silently observing, finally spoke. "If the palace is compromised and this outpost is lost, there's one place we might go: the ancient fortress at Kreldar. It's not on any modern Imperial maps, and its defense systems were designed to operate independently of the central network." Lyra nodded in approval. "A wise choice, General. I'm familiar with it. We discovered references to it during our research into Kronos infiltration patterns. They don't appear to know of its existence." As they set course for the hidden fortress, Zalara found herself in the unprecedented position of being a passenger rather than a commander. Her empire was under attack from within, her palace possibly fallen, and her only allies at this moment were her long-lost daughter, a Terran warrior, a diplomatic advisor, and a general who still clearly harbored doubts about their Terran companion. Yet as she watched Lyra and Alex work together at the ship's controls, communicating in half-sentences and shared glances that spoke of years of absolute trust, she began to understand that perhaps the old Cthar ways, the isolation, the superiority, the distrust of all other species, had left them vulnerable in ways she had never considered. "Mother," Lyra said, turning from the controls once they had cleared the immediate danger zone. "There's something else you should know about Alex and me." She hesitated, then straightened her posture in the way Zalara recognized from Lyra's childhood, the bearing she adopted when preparing to face consequences for a decision she wouldn't reconsider. "We are bonded," Lyra stated simply. In a tradition of the outer reaches, where species distinctions matter less than one's actions and character. Beside her, Alex maintained his focus on the controls, but his posture shifted subtly closer to Lyra's, protective, supportive. Forlag made a sound of shock and disgust, but Zalara silenced him with a raised hand. In any other circumstance, such a declaration might have been scandalous, even treasonous. A princess of the royal bloodline, bonded to a human? Unthinkable. And yet, here they were, her empire crumbling from within, betrayed by those she had trusted, while her daughter and this human had spent 15 years fighting to expose the truth and return home. "We will discuss this matter further when our immediate survival is secured," Zalara said finally. "For now, I need you both focused on getting us safely to Kreldar and establishing contact with trustworthy elements within the Terran Alliance." If Lyra was disappointed by the lack of a more definitive response, she didn't show it. She simply nodded and returned her attention to piloting the ship. But Zalara had seen the brief pressure of Alex's hand on her daughter's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance that spoke volumes about their relationship. The ancient fortress of Kreldar was carved into the face of a dead moon, hidden within an asteroid field that had once been a sacred site for the earliest Cthar space travelers. Its massive doors, crafted from metals mined from the cores of neutron stars, groaned open for the first time in centuries as Lyra's ship approached. Within its cavernous halls, they established a makeshift command center, using equipment from the ship combined with the fortress's ancient but still functional systems. The first priority was to establish secure contact with potential allies within the Terran Alliance. "I've modified the quantum communicator to bypass standard channels," Alex explained as he worked. "If Admiral Costa is still in command of the Phoenix station, this should reach her directly." After tense minutes of static and security protocols, a stern-faced human female appeared on the communication screen. Admiral Costa was older than Alex, her dark hair streaked with silver, her eyes sharp with intelligence and caution. "Lieutenant Ryder," she said, recognition evident in her voice. "You've been presumed dead for 15 years. A necessary deception, Admiral," Alex replied. "I'm transmitting a security package now. It contains evidence of Kronos Corporation's activities and infiltration into both our governments." As the data transferred, Lyra stepped into view. "Admiral Costa, I am Princess Lyra of the Cthar Empire. Your lieutenant, and I have been gathering this intelligence at great risk." The Admiral's expression revealed nothing as she studied the Cthar princess. "And why is Queen Zalara with you?" "Our intelligence indicated she was at the Imperial Palace." Zalara moved into the communication field. "Admiral, my palace has been compromised. An organization called Kronos has placed sleeper agents throughout both our governments. They engineered the war between our peoples and are now preparing to trigger an even greater conflict." Admiral Costa was silent for several long moments, presumably reviewing the data they had transmitted. Finally, she looked up, her expression grim. "This confirms suspicions we've had for years, but could never prove. 3 days ago, we discovered a plot to assassinate 5 key members of the Alliance Council, all moderates who have advocated for improved relations with Cthar." Lyra and Alex exchanged alarmed glances. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," Lyra said. "The final convergence must be imminent." "According to your data," Admiral Costa continued, "their main base is in the Jareth asteroid field. That's in neutral space, Neither of our forces can legally enter without violating the peace accords, which is precisely why they chose it, Zyler noted. Any military movement by either side would be seen as an act of aggression. Zalara's mind raced through options. Then we must create a third force, one not bound by the official positions of either government. A joint strike team, Alex suggested, picking up on her thinking. Unofficial, deniable, composed of those we know aren't compromised. Forlag, who had been silent during the exchange, finally spoke. I have a squadron of elite warriors whose loyalty I can personally vouch for. They serve me directly outside the regular chain of command. And I can assemble a small force of my most trusted operatives, Admiral Costa added. Technically on training exercises, of course. Lyra nodded approvingly. We'll need to move quickly. If Kronos suspects we're coordinating, they'll accelerate their timeline. Over the next hours, plans were formed. Admiral Costa would bring her team to rendezvous with them at a point equidistant from both Cthar and Terran space. From there, they would launch a covert assault on the Kronos base in the Jareth asteroid field. Meanwhile, Lyra and Alex provided detailed briefings on everything they had learned about Kronos operations, tactics, and technology during their 15 years tracking the organization. Their knowledge was encyclopedic, born of desperate necessity and paid for in blood and sacrifice. During a brief respite in the preparations, Zalara found her daughter alone in one of the fortress's ancient observation chambers, staring out at the stars through a crystalline viewport. You move like him, Zalara said without preamble. And he moves like you. It is unsettling to observe. Lyra turned, her expression softening slightly at the sight of her mother. 15 years fighting alongside someone will do that. When your survival depends on anticipating each other's movements, you either learn to move as one or you die. And the bonding? Zalara asked, the words still foreign and uncomfortable on her tongue. Was that also a matter of survival? Lyra's cybernetic hand flexed unconsciously. At first, we were simply allies of necessity, enemies forced to cooperate. But over time, she paused, searching for words. In the uncharted expanse, all that matters is who you can trust. Species, empire, old hatreds. They mean nothing when you're fighting to expose a truth no one wants to hear. You could have returned earlier, Zalara said, an edge of accusation in her voice. I mourned you for 15 years. We tried 3 times, Lyra replied quietly. The first attempt ended with an assassination squad waiting at our planned entry point. The second time, we discovered our contact in Imperial intelligence was a Kronos agent. The third, she gestured to her cybernetic arm. This was the result of our third attempt. For years ago, Zalara stepped closer, her royal composure momentarily giving way to maternal concern as she examined the mechanical limb more carefully. Does it pain you? Not anymore. Alex found a specialist on Gareth 9 who adjusted the neural interfaces. He cares for you. It wasn't a question. As I care for him, Lyra confirmed, meeting her mother's gaze steadily. I know it defies all Cthar tradition. The royal bloodline has remained pure for 30 generations. But war changes perspective, Mother. When you see both Cthar and humans manipulated by the same enemy, dying in the same ways, their blood indistinguishable when spilled, old prejudices seem hollow. Before Zalara could respond, the fortress's ancient alert system activated, its deep tones echoing through the stone corridors. Admiral Costa has arrived, Lyra said, straightening. It's time. The operation against Kronos was planned with the precision of both Cthar strategic doctrine and Terran tactical flexibility. Admiral Costa had brought 12 operatives, a mix of special forces veterans and intelligence agents, all personally vetted and with histories that made them unlikely to be Kronos infiltrators. General Forlag's team consisted of 9 Cthar warriors from his personal guard, plus 3 Imperial intelligence specialists summoned from deep cover operations. Together with Lyra, Alex, Zalara, Forlag, and Zyler, they represented perhaps the only force in the galaxy aware of and equipped to confront the Kronos conspiracy. Their target was identified from Lyra and Alex's intelligence, a massive asteroid in the Jareth field that had been hollowed out and converted into Kronos headquarters. According to their information, this was where the Singularity weapons were being prepared for deployment. Their defense systems are formidable, Lyra explained during the final briefing aboard the Joint Command Vessel. Multiple layers of automated weapons platforms, patrol ships, and short-range fighters. But we have one advantage. They don't know we're coming together. Alex continued the briefing seamlessly. Based on intercepted communications, Kronos believes Queen Zalara was killed in the attack on the outpost, and that the Cathar Empire is in disarray. Meanwhile, they think Admiral Costa is still investigating the assassination plot within the Alliance, unaware of the bigger picture. So we exploit their overconfidence, Admiral Costa concluded. A two-pronged assault, Terran forces drawing attention to the main docking facility while the Cathar team infiltrates through this maintenance shaft. She indicated a point on the holographic display of the asteroid base. Forlag studied the approach with a tactical eye. Risky. If they detect our insertion team too early, both groups will be trapped. Which is why I'll be leading the insertion team, Lyra stated. I know Kronos protocols better than anyone, and Alex will coordinate between both teams from the command vessel. He speaks both languages fluently and understands both tactical doctrines. Zalara, who had remained silent during much of the planning, finally spoke. I will accompany the insertion team. This announcement was met with immediate protest from Forlag, Xyler, and even Lyra. Mother, with respect, the risk is unacceptable for anyone but me, Zalara interrupted firmly. I'm still queen of the Cathar Empire. If this conspiracy has indeed penetrated our highest levels of government, then my direct testimony of what we discover will be essential to purging Kronos' influence afterward. Her logic was impeccable, as befitted a Cathar queen, and no one could refute it. Reluctantly, the plan was adjusted to include her. The assault began 12 hours later. As their ships approached the asteroid field, all communications went silent. The Terran squad, led by Admiral Costa herself, launched a direct approach toward the main docking facility, their ships flying in Terran military formation. As predicted, this drew immediate attention from Kronos' defenses. Meanwhile, the Cathar insertion team, consisting of Zalara, Lyra, Forlag, and 6 elite warriors, navigated through the dense asteroid field using a smaller craft with enhanced stealth capabilities. They approached the maintenance shaft undetected, using codes Lyra and Alex had painstakingly gathered over years of surveillance. The fighting was intense from the moment they breached the outer hull. Kronos security forces were well-trained and equipped with advanced weapons that incorporated both Cathar and Terran design elements, modified to be even more lethal. Lyra led the insertion team with confidence born of intimate knowledge of the enemy. Her cybernetic arm proved to be more than a replacement for her lost limb. It contained tools and capabilities specifically designed for infiltration, including an electromagnetic pulse generator that disrupted Kronos security systems. Zalara fought alongside her daughter, moving with the lethal grace that had made her a formidable warrior before she ascended to the throne. She observed with growing respect how Lyra had adapted Cathar combat techniques to compensate for her cybernetic limb, creating a hybrid fighting style as unique as the ship that had brought them here. Through their secure communications link, they heard sporadic updates from Alex as he coordinated between their team and Admiral Costa's diversionary assault. The Terrans were holding their own, but taking casualties. The clock was ticking. Following Lyra's lead, they fought their way deeper into the asteroid base, past security checkpoints and automated defense systems. Finally, they reached a massive chamber at the heart of the facility. Inside, they found what they were looking for: 3 prototype Singularity weapons, each the size of a small shuttle, ready for deployment. Around them worked a team of scientists, both Cathar and Terran, working side by side in service to Kronos. "Intruders," shouted one of the scientists, triggering another wave of security forces to pour into the chamber. As Forlag and his warriors engaged the guards, Lyra pulled Zalara toward the central control station. "We need to disable the weapons," she explained, her fingers already flying over the unfamiliar interface. But they've locked the system. It needs executive override authorization, which we don't have, Zalara realized grimly. Actually, we might. Lyra pulled a small device from her utility belt. Alex and I prepared for this possibility. During our years tracking Kronos, we identified several of their highest-ranking members. This device contains forged authorization codes based on their security patterns. She connected the device to the control station. For several tense moments, nothing happened as the battle raged around them. Then, the system pinged acceptance, and the Singularity weapon's status indicators shifted from ready to standby. It worked, Lyra said with relief. Now we need to step away from the controls, came a cold voice from behind them. They turned to find a tall, elegant Cthar male aiming an advanced energy weapon at them. His scales held the distinctive coloration of the Imperial Advisory Council, but neither Zalara nor Lyra recognized him personally. Counselor Trazek, Forlag growled, recognizing the newcomer despite being pinned down by enemy fire across the chamber. I thought you perished in the Nelvarin campaign. A convenient fiction, Trazek replied smoothly. My talents were better utilized elsewhere. As the humans say, follow the money. War is profitable for those positioned correctly. Zalara's eyes narrowed. You betrayed your empire, your species, for profit. For vision, your majesty, Trazek corrected. The Cthar Empire has grown stagnant, clinging to outdated notions of species purity and superiority. Humans have proven more adaptable. Kronos represents the future, a fusion of Cthar strategic brilliance and Terran innovation, unburdened by the political baggage of either empire. You speak of innovation while planning mass destruction, Lyra countered, subtly shifting her position to shield her mother. Those weapons would have killed billions. Necessary casualties to break the grip of two failing empires, Trazek said dismissively. Now step away from the controls, or I will be forced to demonstrate some of Kronos' more personal innovations. He adjusted his weapon to a setting that made even Forlag flinch. At that moment, the chamber shook violently as an explosion rocked the base. Through their communications link, Alex's voice came urgently. Admiral Costa's team breached the main reactor. You have 20 minutes before this entire facility goes critical. Trazek's momentary distraction was all Lyra needed. With blinding speed, her cybernetic arm extended, revealing a concealed weapon that fired a concentrated electromagnetic pulse directly at the traitor's counselor. His weapon shorted out in his hand, causing him to drop it with a hiss of pain. Zalara moved simultaneously, drawing her royal dagger and closing the distance before Trazek could recover. She held the blade to his throat, her expression coldly regal. For a strategist of your reputation, Counselor, she said quietly, you made a fundamental error. You assumed I would care more for tradition than truth. With a precise movement, she incapacitated him without killing. He would stand trial for his crimes, a living testament to the corruption that had nearly destroyed two civilizations. Mother, we need to move, Lyra urged, having returned to the control station. I've initiated the self-destruct sequence for the weapons, but we have to get out before the reactor goes critical. They fought their way back through the facility, now in chaos as Kronos personnel fled the doomed base. General Forlag took charge of the prisoner, while Lyra led them through alternate routes to avoid the heaviest fighting. When they finally reached their extraction point, they found Alex waiting with their ship already powered up. Admiral Costa and 7 of her team made it out, he reported as they boarded. They're heading to the rendezvous point now. As they pulled away from the asteroid base, Zalara watched through the viewport as the massive structure began to break apart, secondary explosions erupting along its surface. With the Singularity weapons destroyed and Trazek captured, they had struck a devastating blow against Kronos, but she harbored no illusions that the organization had been completely defeated. In the aftermath of the Jareth asteroid field operation, both the Cthar Empire and the Terran Alliance found themselves in turmoil. The evidence Lyra and Alex had gathered, combined with Counselor Trazek's testimony, exposed Kronos' infiltration at the highest levels of both governments. The ensuing purges were painful but necessary, rooting out agents who had manipulated policy and fomented hatred for decades. A historic summit was convened on neutral territory, the ancient and revered Galactic Council Sanctuary, where Queen Zalara and the newly appointed Terran Alliance president met face to face. It was the first such meeting between heads of state since before the war. "We have been played against each other," Zalara stated in her opening address, her voice carrying across the Grand Chamber. "For too long, we viewed each other as inherently incompatible, the logical Cthar and the emotional humans. We saw these differences as unbridgeable, when in fact they could be complementary." The Terran president, a dignified woman who had lost family in the war, nodded in solemn agreement. "Our differences made us vulnerable to manipulation. But in our joint operation against Kronos, we proved that those same differences, when aligned toward a common purpose, can become our greatest strength." The summit established new protocols for cooperation, joint security operations to hunt down remaining Kronos cells, cultural exchange programs to foster better understanding, and the formation of a new, more empowered Galactic Council with real authority to prevent future conflicts. At the palace on Cthara Prime, now secured and purged of Kronos influence, Zalara stood on her private balcony overlooking the capital city. Beside her stood Lyra, no longer dressed as a fugitive but not quite in traditional royal attire either. Her clothing reflected both her Cthar heritage and the practical influences of her years in exile. "The High Council has confirmed your formal reinstatement as Imperial Princess and heir," Zalara informed her. Though some of the more traditional houses expressed concerns about your time away, Lyra smiled faintly. "They're more concerned about Alex than about my cybernetic arm, I imagine." "Indeed," Zalara turned to face her daughter directly. "Which brings me to a rather unprecedented proposition. The new Galactic Council requires representatives who truly understand both our peoples. I am nominating you as Special Ambassador, a position that would allow you to serve the Empire while also building this new peace." Lyra's expression revealed her surprise. "Not the traditional role of an Imperial heir." "These are not traditional times," Zalara replied. "And you're not the same princess who left 15 years ago. Your experiences, your perspective, even your bond with Alex, these are assets now, not liabilities." At the mention of Alex, Lyra's posture softened slightly. "He's been invited to serve as Admiral Costa's chief advisor on the Joint Security Task Force. A fitting role for his skills," Zalara acknowledged, "and one that would place you both in similar diplomatic circles, should you accept the ambassadorship." Lyra studied her mother's face carefully. "You're giving us your blessing, then?" "I am acknowledging reality," Zalara answered, though her tone had warmed. "Your bond with him is evident in every movement, every glance. Fighting it would be illogical, particularly when it symbolizes exactly the kind of cooperation our empires now need." Later that evening, as Lyra prepared for her first public appearance since her return, Alex joined her in her chambers. He wore a formal uniform that combined elements of Terran military dress with subtle Cthar design influences, a diplomatic statement in itself. "Admiral Costa says the last major chrono cell in Terran space was raided yesterday," he reported. 17 arrests, including 2 Alliance senators. "Similar progress here," Lyra replied, though Trazek warns that some operatives are so deeply embedded they don't even know. They're sleeper agents. We'll be rooting out the aftermath for years." Alex moved closer, taking her hand, flesh meeting cybernetic in a gesture that had become natural to them both. "Your mother offered me a position as security liaison to your ambassadorial staff," he said with a hint of amusement. "I believe that's her way of keeping an eye on me while acknowledging us." "Progress," Lyra agreed with a smile. 15 years ago, she would have had you executed for looking at me too long." Her expression grew more serious. "Are you ready for this? Being the first human integrated into Cthar Imperial circles won't be easy." "Being the first anything is never easy," Alex replied. "But after everything we've survived together, diplomatic discomfort seems like a minor challenge." He paused, then added more softly. Besides, someone needs to watch her back. Old habits die hard. From her balcony, Queen Zalara watched as her daughter and Alex departed for the diplomatic reception. They moved together with that uncanny synchronization that still unsettled her. Cthar grace and Terran adaptability blended into something entirely new. The road ahead would not be smooth. Centuries of mistrust could not be erased by a single victory or revelation. The conservative factions in both societies would resist change, and the remnants of Kronos would certainly attempt to rebuild from the shadows. Yet watching her daughter, once thought lost forever, now returned with wisdom earned through hardship, Zalara felt something she had not experienced in decades: genuine hope. The Cthar Empire would survive, but it would also evolve. And perhaps that evolution, painful though it might be, was exactly what they needed. Peace had been achieved, but maintaining and building it would be another battle entirely. One that required not just the strategic brilliance that Cthar prided themselves on, but also the emotional intelligence and adaptability they had long dismissed as human weakness. As twilight fell over the capital, Zalara remained on her balcony long after Lyra and Alex had disappeared from view. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky, the same stars that had witnessed the ancient wars, the rise and fall of empires, and now, perhaps, the beginning of something truly unprecedented. It was not the future she had envisioned when she took the throne, nor when she mourned her daughter's supposed death. But as any true Cthar strategist knew, the greatest victories often came not from following the expected path, but from embracing the unpredictable when necessary. And her daughter, her brilliant, changed, resilient daughter, was nothing if not unpredictable.